Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast,
Boston's premier art podcast,
where we talk art, culture, and philosophy.
My name is Theodore Earthworms.
And I am Brian Huntress.
Welcome to the show.
This is Kaya.
Hi, Kaya. This is Theodora and Brian from the Boston Art Podcast.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Great.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. We're so excited to talk to you.
Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course.
Of course. And is it good to get started right off the bat, or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're there's a lot of backstory, I guess, that's led up to us having you on, where Theo wanted to do a story recently about queer and femme experience, working on cars or trying to get cars fixed and this and that. So it's so with Theo wanting to do that, and you on your book tour, this seems like fate.
Yeah.
It really was. I saw your email and I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to get me on before the book tour. But
It's actually so funny.
Don't get fed.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're happy to, because I mean, our show is definitely pretty by the seat of our pants, and we're just always, just doing stuff and just slapping things together, obviously taking it very seriously, but yeah, we can have a very fast turnaround time with the way that we run the show.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love it.
So to get right into it too, I want to kind of talk about a little bit about your background maybe before we get into where you're at right now. How did you get into fixing cars?
Absolutely. Can you hang on 1 second? I'm terribly sorry. I just need to tell somebody to be quiet.
Oh, no
yeah,
worries.
no problem. Do whatever you got to do.
I can hear the taping. I don't know if you could hear it. 1 second.
My sock is all bunched up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In your shoe?
Yeah, it sucks. Trying to fix it right now. Run
I wish you
away.
Oh my God, that is one reason why I don't wear socks.
Yeah, oh yeah.
At least I try very hard.
What do
Yeah.
you wear instead? Do you wear shoes that accommodate the no sock vibe?
I just almost always wear sandals.
Oh,
that's
very
awesome.
good. Are you from a warm region?
Say it again?
Are you from a warmer region? What
No.
state are you in?
I'm just fat, and
I see.
there's not a lot of good shoe options.
Wow.
But otherwise, I wear the really short socks so that they don't bunch up the same way that the long socks do.
Right, yeah. The only thing about those is that they slide down. It's a lose-lose situation.
So where were we? Theo asked, was it how you got started as a mechanic, Kaya?
Yeah.
Sure. So I just want to clarify, I'm not a mechanic. I'm an automotive educator and journalist, and
cool.
I'm going to be an author in 15 days.
Exciting!
Wow.
Thank you. Mechanic Shop Femme's Guide to Car Ownership comes out on April 9th, and I'm actually starting my book tour in Massachusetts, which is so cool. But anyhow, let me back up. I started working in the automotive industry when I was 18 years old. I was aging out of the foster care system. I was looking for a job pretty much nonstop throughout the end of my senior year of high school. And couldn't find anything. I could not find anything, no matter how hard I tried.
Right.
I could barely get any interviews. It was 2013. The economy wasn't that great. It was just sort of starting to come back, and I didn't know anybody who could introduce me. My foster parents were, I believe they were in their 70s already by then.
Oh, wow.
And so they didn't know anybody who worked customer service jobs or restaurant jobs that they could introduce me to. So I started a GoFundMe. And I explained my situation and I told my story, and people were incredible. People were so kind and so helpful. And someone reached out to me. Her name was Faith, and she said that her dad had sent her the GoFundMe, and he told her that he thought that she should help me. And that she should reach out. We were in the same city. And she did. And she reached out and she said, I already looked you up. I already made sure you're legit. And I was like, okay. And and I want to know how I can help you. I know that giving you money is helpful, but like, what is really going to help?
Interesting.
So I said, I need a job. And she said, oh, I have the perfect opportunity for you. It's somebody she knew very closely, worked at the local Sears department store as the HR manager.
Oh, great.
Right? And she's like, I can't promise you anything, but I can get you an interview. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. I went in for the interview. She asked me, the HR manager, what department I wanted to work in, and I said, I don't know. Whichever one makes the most money. I'm very much a Capricorn. And she said, well, appliances or automotive. And I chose automotive because it sounded more interesting. And then, of course, she told me, so do you have a driver's license? And I was like, no.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Right?
Well,
There's a few other things happened before the job actually happened. I tell a little bit more about that story in the introduction to the book. But it was really this incredible opportunity that I thought was going to be super temporary. Like, I was just going to get this job and I was going to move on with my life. And, having a job helps you get another job. And I was going to go on to all kinds of interesting things. But that's not what happened.
Right. I wonder, too, just before we move a little forward, I find it interesting as an 18-year-old femme person, like, going into the workforce for the first time, that with that decision of, like, appliances or automotive, that you chose automotive, like, right off the bat. Was there a reason for that? Were you just curious about it, or did you... Because I think when I think about that, and what I might have done if I were in your shoes was be put off right away by the idea of working in the automotive section.
I don't think I thought too hard about it. When I was in high school, I had expressed interest in, like, the shop class.
Yeah.
But it was made very clear to me that I was going to be the only woman in that class, and I was already having a really hard time in the high school that I was in, coming in as a foster kid and, being from outside that specific area. So I didn't move forward with it. And I never really thought I was going to get my driver's license. And I didn't really anticipate what this job was going to entail. Like, I thought I was just going to check people out, that I was just going to be a cashier. And I quickly learned that that's not the case. Like, in order to be a service advisor, a service manager, in order to work with customers in the automotive space and to be good at it, you need to understand cars, and you need to understand cars from the perspective of the mechanics you're working with and from the perspective of the consumers you're working with. And, that's where I came up with my, like, I'm a mechanic interpreter. I'm like the middle person that translates the language to each of the parties until...
Right. That's a really important role to be in. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people talk about, foster care is pretty well known in the zeitgeist of people having a variety of different experiences, good and bad. Was your experience growing up in foster care positive?
I mean, that's an interesting question to ask. I don't think anybody has a positive experience in the foster care system. Anybody who is going into foster care or has gone into foster care is there because of some tragic circumstances that landed them there, whether their parents passed when they were young or their parents, struggle to take care of them the way that they should, or, they are going through things with their parents that make that home no longer a safe place for them. But I don't think anybody really goes into foster care expecting that it's going to be all roses and lilies. It's
right.
Even in the best of circumstances.
Right. There's that shadow kind of hanging over it.
Right.
It's also temporary. Foster care is not intended to be a long-term solution. And despite many queer folks and many other people in the adoption industry expecting that when they get children in their home, that these are children that are going to want to be their kids. That's not really the point. The point of foster care is supposed to be to reunite children with their biological parents in whatever method possible, with whatever support systems are available.
Right.
Do you feel like that incentivizes people kind of against that reunification, like people almost using it as some kind of fast track of adoption or something?
I mean, I think anybody who's been a foster parent or has been in the foster care system knows that it's definitely not a fast track.
Right.
But I definitely see people, you know, in Facebook groups and stuff when they're talking about having children, especially in queer spaces, you know, as foster care is like this shortcut. But I'm confident that once they get into the system, they see that that's not the case at all.
Right.
I see. Huh. So you've from your experience, you've seen a lot of people in queer circles talking about foster care as an avenue towards building a family?
I mean, yeah.
Anecdotally interesting. Huh.
So to bring it back to the Sears position, that sounds like it was a really educational role for you, like in that kind of entryway into the career path that you're in now.
Yeah, it was a really incredible opportunity that I was not expecting to be an opportunity, that I was never planning to make anything of, and that I really had no idea what I was getting into when I decided, you know, to move forward.
Yeah. So how did that go from that role to writing the book that you've written now? Like what happened in between?
So I started at Sears over 10 years ago at this point, and within a short time I moved to New York City, and I continued working for Sears Auto Center in Brooklyn. And then, you know, I started to feel like I was outgrowing the space that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking for other jobs and eventually making my way to dealerships and to other repair shops. And while I was working at an independently owned franchise in Brooklyn, I was also doing a lot of other side jobs. You know, y'all are in Boston, so I'm sure you can understand how in a large city sometimes having one job doesn't keep you feeling comfortable. You know, you're still living paycheck to paycheck in every imaginable way. And I'm a hard worker. I've always been a workaholic. I always needed to be doing something. So I started doing all kinds of other work. I ran an underground queer car service. I sold Berecas at farmers markets. I did like marketing and data entry for a podiatrist, just a lot of really random jobs. And I couldn't really see where my career was going. I knew that I really loved what I did, but I also knew that I was at the top of my field. I was a service manager at the time, and the only way up was to go into like the corporate space, the cubicles, working in a space where I didn't get to deal with real people every single day who had car problems and who needed assistance. So I met with a career coach, and I was like, okay, I need to know what my next steps are. I need somebody to talk this through with me. And she suggested that I start a blog, which I later called Mechanic Shop Femme. Mm-hmm. And she said, people want to learn from you. You know, you have a lot of this car stuff to offer, basic fundamental education for the average car owner. People are already reaching out to you and asking you for this advice, you know, in messages on Facebook and things like that. So start a blog. And I was like, oh, that's just a terrible idea. I'm not a writer. I don't know how to write. I'm terrible at spelling. This is just not going to be my thing. But you know what? I'm the type of person that I'm willing to try things. Right. I like to say, you know, I throw noodles against the wall and see what sticks. So I was like, you know what? It can't hurt. It can't hurt. And like, she showed me this blog as it's going to end up in this big career. And I was like, oh, that's very unlikely. But you know what? It can't hurt. Let me do this. Right. So I started writing some blog posts, and people were super interested in these blog posts. I was teaching people about oil changes and used tires and how to get a raise at work and telling them my story. And within a short time of starting this blog, I was like, okay, now I need to see where this is going next. Like, this is a thing. I realize it's a thing. I realize it can become something important, but I need to have an end goal in sight, or not an end goal, but like a goal in sight. I need to know which direction I'm moving in. So I asked a Facebook group for women entrepreneurs, and I was like, I'm writing this blog, here's what I do for work, and I'm trying to figure out what to do to build this into a business, because I didn't see how I can take the blog and turn it into something that will make money and help people at the same time. Mm-hmm. And they suggested that I teach car classes. And that was just sort of mind-blowing. I was like, I don't want to teach people how to fix their own cars, but at the same time, I had a friend who was going through some problems with a truck that they had recently purchased, and this was a truck after the last vehicle they had purchased that also had problems, and they brought it into my shop, and it turned out that this truck had a rusted gas tank, and it was an Isuzu.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we could not find a replacement gas tank for this vehicle, and that was basically the end of the life of the truck.
Yeah.
But afterwards, he messaged me on Facebook, and he would start to like send me links to Craigslist, and they would tell me, so I see this car, and I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about it? Like, I've done all my stuff, and I think it sounds good, but is there anything that you notice? And we went back and forth like this until they bought an awesome Honda CRV that I'm pretty sure they drive until today.
Oh,
and
that's
that was
cool.
like my light bulb moment, right? I was like, oh my God, I got to teach people how to buy a car.
Yeah, that is, I think, hands down, out of anything that I've had to do in the like sphere of adulthood, buying a car has been the most stressful experience of my life, because so much of it is from my experience, I feel like so much of it is a risk. Like, you're spending so much money. It's one of the biggest purchases you're going to make in adulthood. And there's so much unstable information. Like, if you don't really know, if you don't have a mechanic that you can trust or someone you can talk to about buying cars, it feels like somebody's going to sell you something like with a rusted gas tank, Mm-hmm. So it can be really stressful.
I completely agree. And that's why when I posted in a few Facebook groups, a link to my blog, and in the caption, at the bottom of the caption, I wrote, P.S. I'm thinking about teaching a class on how to buy a used car.
Yeah.
Send me a message if you're interested. I sold out my class in a couple of days.
That's awesome.
Right? I didn't even make this class yet. I had just been thinking about it. But I had done it enough in advance that I could make the class, and I did. And for the first couple of years, I taught literally just sitting, going live on my phone in a private Facebook group to folks that had signed up.
Right.
And taught hundreds of people from all over the country how to buy a used car. And then I came up with another class, the whys and whens of car maintenance, and then more classes. Today I have 8 different virtual classes, from buying a used car to maintenance to electric vehicles, insurance and tires, everything in between. And I have taught these classes to groups of folks, primarily queer folks, that join my public classes, but I've also taught them at universities like Vanderbilt and John Jay, University of California. I've taught them at the America's Car Museum and a whole bunch of other really cool places, because this type of education and this type of knowledge is universally needed. Yeah, I'm teaching at the Broad Institute for MIT and Harvard in May and June.
Oh, that's so cool.
Right? And I don't have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
But these engineers need help buying a used car and maintenance and how to find a mechanic just like anybody else does. Because it is such a complicated field that women and queer folks have been intentionally excluded from, not just from participating as workers in these spaces, but as being car owners that are knowledgeable on how to buy a car and how to maintain it, how to find a good mechanic. Because these places have been historically racist and homophobic and sexist, and have been so incredibly uncomfortable for everybody involved to just go get their car fixed.
Right. Which is an insane thing to think about. Like, it seems like it should be so simple to get that handled, but it's so true. I know it's a Jiffy Lube or a Valvoline that's in my area, that there's one person who works there who is a femme presenting person, and I love when she's there because it just makes it so much easier to just do an oil change, like go in for a basic transaction. And there was a time that I went in where she was dealing with a customer who questioned her knowledge, like really bluntly in a very sexist way, just at the counter. And he left and she just looked at me and she was like, "Did you fucking see that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And it's like, it's crazy that, like, I've been a car owner in Massachusetts for, how old am I? Like almost 10 years-ish. And to have met one person that I can count on my hands that I can have that, like, just a basic conversation with, that I don't feel preyed upon when I'm talking to them, it's pretty remarkable. In a bad way, I think. So it's really exciting to hear you doing this, because I think that it's an industry that is really difficult to access as a consumer. And I can only imagine if you were interested in becoming a mechanic, or if you wanted to educate yourself more about how to take care of your car on your own. Like, that's what my recent focus has been trying to figure out how to DIY more repairs for my own budget. And even accessing that information is so difficult, which is how I found your posting and what you do. So it's a really tangible impact that you're making, I think.
I completely agree. And, you know, one thing that is interesting to me, as you said, that there's this Femme presenting person at your local Quick Lube, is that is actually how I recommend women and queer folks enter the industry. Go work at your local Valvoline. Go work at your local Take 5. They hire pretty much anybody.
Right.
And they will train you in the basics, which is not going to pay very much. Mm-hmm. It's going to pay probably minimum wage or just a little bit above that. But it will give you the opportunity to learn those basics and give you sort of a stepping stool to the next step. Because from a customer point of view, those quick loops are not really great for your car. In a lot of different ways. And, you know, in my book, Mechanic Shop, Femme's Guide to Car Ownership, I have a whole chapter that's dedicated to how to find a mechanic. And in that chapter, I break down not just, you know, what questions to ask, but what are the different types of shops?
Yeah.
And how to find the shop that fits your needs and your budget best. You know, starting from dealerships and quick lubes and specialty stores and independent shops, and how, you know, the difference between different independent shops, because there's mom and pop shops, there's franchises, there's network shops. And then how to find the best one that's going to suit all of those different needs.
Right.
So in terms of the book, I'm curious to know, is it like, as it contains a lot of these instructions and technical information, but does it also have an element of it being a memoir about your own story? Or is, like, I'm curious to know if it's more focused on being a big, like a kind of encyclopedic technical book as well as a memoir, or I'm curious to hear you speak on that part of it.
Sure. So I just want to clarify that Mechanic Shop Femme's Guide to Car Ownership is not a technical handbook. It is not a DIY manual, and
Right.
It's not for car enthusiasts. Although, you know, anybody can benefit from the information that's there. Even people who are focused on fixing their car might not know how to buy their car, insure their car, you know, all of those other elements to it. It's really the average person's guide to car ownership. I do have elements of my own stories and my own experiences in it, primarily, you know, in the introduction and in the conclusion, as well as sharing my experiences with customers and in repair shops and with people that I've spoken to, and experiences that I've had that are relevant to helping you better understand the concepts that I'm teaching. But it's not a memoir in the traditional sense of a memoir. You know, my understanding is my friend Kine just came out with a book called Math and Drag, and that book is far more memoir, but also has a serious, like, math element to it. I think mine has less memoir than that. Although, like I said, there are stories, my own stories, and there are also stories that my followers and friends and community have submitted about their experiences that I use to help illustrate the concepts that I'm educating about in the book. So I start with, you know, my introduction, who I am, and before the introduction, there's a foreword by Jill Trotta. She is a master mechanic and a powerhouse in the automotive industry. She's a queer woman who, and the ticket sales for my book tour will go towards a scholarship named after her to help
cool.
women and queer folks entering the industry. Yeah. So I start, with my introduction, telling people my philosophy about cars, how I got started, what my life experiences are, and how they've informed how I write this book. And then I go straight into, here's how you buy a car. I got 2 chapters on buying a car, negotiating, how to inspect the car, how to take the car to the mechanic, how to figure out what the best car is, even is for your car, for your budget and for your life and for your needs, And then I go into car insurance. How do I get that car insured? What is the breakup of different insurance policies, explanations of, how much insurance you actually need and what insurance requirements need to be met if you're leasing or financing a car. I talk about gap insurance, and I talk about extended warranties, how to find a good one, who needs one, what are the alternatives to extended warranties. And it sort of follows the natural trajectory of car ownership. So buying, insuring, and then of course you have how to find a mechanic so that you can take really good care of that car, and going through preventive maintenance, how to maintain your vehicle, tires, brakes, how to find a mechanic. I have a chapter on electric cars and hybrids, and of course I have information on how to sell your car, how to prevent your car from being stolen, just all the fundamentals that are critical for car owners from in every stage of life, whether they're 15 just getting their driver's license, or you're 75 and you're buying a car that's different from the car that you drove for the last 15 years, and you're, how do you handle that? I'm really proud that this is a book that pretty much anybody can learn something from. And while there are a lot of great DIY books out there and YouTube channels and stuff like that, I found that for most regular car owners, the folks that are taking their kids to school and just trying to get to work and make it through their life, they're not trying to take their car apart on the driveway of their home and fix it. And cars have gotten complicated and technical, even for some of the mechanics that are working in certain repair shops. So this is my way of bringing something into the space that I don't think has been done in the way that I'm doing it.
Right. I think it's interesting too, as you're recounting all the different topics that are in the book, how I'm just reflecting on how many of them I don't know the answers to. And I'm just thinking, I wonder if there's been, or maybe you have some thoughts on this, and maybe sort of just me thinking out loud, but I'm thinking that I feel like maybe a few generations ago, knowledge on how to maintain a car, it was more common for people to have that. I feel like now a lot of devices that we use every day, like your computer or your phone or whatever, those investments that we know we're probably going to need to make for work or to stay in touch with our loved ones or for safety reasons or whatever, your car falls in that category. And most of those things aren't things that you need to be super knowledgeable about for continuous maintenance, which, for better or for worse, I don't know, maybe that's a reflection on waste in our culture, but if your phone works until it doesn't work, and then when it doesn't work, you bring it in to any phone guy or you get a new phone, you don't have to really be knowledgeable on what kind of phone you're buying. You're probably going to get whatever you can afford, and it is what it is. And that's true to an extent with cars, but there's also, like, you have to know all of those things you were saying about, like, insurance, whether or not you need gap insurance. You need to know what happens if you get in an accident. If you pop a tire, you're not going to throw your whole car away. And I think it can be really difficult because it's such, compared to the way that we maintain other important investments, it's considered almost a whole new field of information. Like, somebody who knows a lot about cars, you want to talk to them, versus it seems like something that everybody, as you're saying, should know how to do for the sake of their own finances and safety. So it's just interesting to me that that's not the norm.
And you know what? It's not the norm for women and queer folks. For a lot of men, this knowledge is passed on from their father and their father's father. And, I had a comment on my social media a couple years ago that just really stuck with me. It was a young gay man, and he commented and he said, "My parents spent more time focusing on how to make me not gay than teaching me how to be a productive member of society and be able to get my car fixed and do the fundamentals of this basic thing that we all have to do.
Right.
And, I wish I had saved it so I can quote it directly because it was just so powerful. But I think he was definitely right. This is all knowledge that we should all have. This should all be things that we should learn before we get our first car, before we even, start driving to an extent, and knowledge that should be continued to be updated as we own our vehicles and as cars change. But the automotive industry almost intentionally puts up barriers to make it so that it's hard to understand what's going on with your car. And it's even harder to try to go and talk to somebody about it because that person will disrespect you, or that person will misgender you, or, you're going to go buy a car and you're black and you're going to get charged a percentage point more in interest. It's going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars over the life of your car.
Right.
One of the things I quote in the introduction of the book is that I recently read this Slate article titled something along the lines of "Stare into the Republican Soul in 2023," and it was an article that one of the points that really stuck out to me is that the National Automotive Dealers Association spent more money lobbying conservatives than the National Rifle Association.
Wow.
And that conservative mentality and that conservative approach to inclusivity and knowledge and, just gatekeeping, it definitely reflects in people's experiences when they go get their car fixed or buy a car, anything really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like an industry where you can expect that will be your experience when you, like, if you have to get your car fixed, or if something goes wrong with my car, my first thought is like, oh my God, like, I just don't want to deal with this right now. Like, I don't want to have that negative experience.
Exactly.
And Thea, you mentioned buying phones earlier. It's like buying cars is also one of the only industries where there's a real fear that the person might just completely fucking rip you off, and you just buy a busted shitbox car and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't happen at the Apple store. Like, you don't buy a laptop and it's like, oh, we lied.
It just doesn't work.
Like, sorry.
Yeah. And it also...
No, but I think you have to compare buying a used car, which is what most people are doing, to buying used phones.
Right.
Not to buying brand new phones at the Apple store. So it requires a little bit more knowledge than just walking in and buying whatever you want. Because if you're buying a new car, you could, in fact, walk in and buy pretty much everything you want. You might pay a little bit more than somebody else, but you're going to get the car you want.
That's true. I guess my brain just defaults to buying a used car, so I've never bought a new one.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense, though. Especially, it's interesting, too, I'm sure you have thoughts on this, the market for buying leased used cars in the last few years, like post-pandemic, has been absolutely insane. Like, my most recent car switch, I had a car that was a secondhand car that unfortunately was on its last leg and eventually died at the end of 2021 during the chip shortage when interest rates were really high and everything was just a mess. And I'm still paying off a used car. I have a 2006 Honda Civic that I love, but it leaks water and it's like, it runs fine, but there's a lot of things that are kind of wrong with it, and I'm going to be paying it off for probably another year and a half. So it's not really a great time for somebody buying a used car or a first-time driver buying a new car.
It's better now than it was a year and a half ago, that's for sure.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of, instability in the market, but the other element to buying a vehicle right now that is certainly complicating things is the interest rates. Buying a car, even a couple years ago, buying a car at a higher dollar amount, the interest rates were far lower than they are right now. And now when you go buy a car, even if the price is more reasonable than it was a few years ago, the added cost of financing that vehicle is certainly making things very difficult for car owners out there.
Right. I wonder too, what are some things that you think would be, like, if you had to put out some bullet points of, like, 3 things that are the most important things to learn about when you're first kind of embarking on this journey, what do you think those things would be for a new car owner?
Make sure to take your car into a mechanic to get a pre-purchase inspection before you buy the car. When you are buying a used car, you are essentially buying it as is. There are very select lemon laws that might apply, but it's very unlikely that you will have any protection in the event that you purchase a used car that has more problems than you were expecting. Because you are buying the car the way that it's built, and it's your responsibility to make sure that the car is in the condition that you expect before you pay for it. Taking it in after you buy the car does not help you in this process.
Right.
So when you're going and you're thinking about buying a used car, and you've picked out the car, you've driven it, and it looks good, and you've taken a look at it, before you put your money down, make sure you go and get that car inspected by a mechanic to make sure it's actually in the condition that they say it is. And this could mean that you won't end up buying the car, but what usually happens, especially if it's a new or used car, or especially if it's a car being purchased from a dealership, is that they will likely fix the problems.
Yeah.
And that could be part of your negotiation process.
Yeah, because they have that incentive to make the sale.
Yeah, absolutely. But also because now that they know that there's a mechanical failure with it, if it's not a maintenance-related failure, then sometimes in certain circumstances they may have the responsibility to make the repair.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, it's like buying a house. You're not going to want to skip the home inspection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But most people don't think of getting a home inspection for their car.
Yeah. Huh. That is interesting. The last time that I bought a car, I did do that, and I was very glad that I did, because they actually did catch, I forget what it was. There was something wrong with the trunk or something, and they ended up fixing it for me just to make the sale happen. But I hadn't in the past, and just got, I guess, exceptionally lucky. But yeah, it's definitely really important to do, because you never know. There was another car that we were looking at that I didn't bring it all the way in for an inspection, but I called my dad and I was like, can you please come look at this with me? And he doesn't know a lot about cars, but I just felt better having him there to make it seem like he does, I guess. And he looked at it, and the guy was like, actually, I don't feel comfortable selling this to you. This is a really bad car. And just showed me a different one, which was weird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because women tend to go into repair shops with far more research and knowledge.
Right.
You know, whether they're going into a repair shop or they're going to buy a car than most men. And I think that people think that, you know, oh, if a man goes in to get the car fixed, then he's going to get a better price or he's going to have a better experience. Really, the man is just told in language that he should understand that this is what your car needs. It made it seem like it's his idea. And most men don't know a whole lot about cars, where women aren't going to take anything at face value.
Right.
You know, it's not going to be a man-to-man conversation. And, you know, I feel like queer folks definitely fall into the more research category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially anticipating that you're not going to hear something that's 100% true the first time you talk to the person. You're going to want to research it more.
Exactly.
Yeah. Especially because I think something that is what drives so much of the stress around this as a queer femme person is, like, buying a car is no small decision. It's usually sudden because your old car died or something, or you didn't have one and you need it to get to and from work. Like, you have a time limit financially on how long it's going to take you to do this transaction. It's probably all of your savings, if not more than that, and you're uncertain about what's going on. So the more information you have, the better to protect yourself from financial devastation, really.
Exactly, because your car, for most people, is their second largest transaction, and that's if they buy a house.
Right.
You know, this is the most expensive thing that you're probably going to purchase for the foreseeable future. And if you purchase the wrong car, you're going to empty your bank account and you're going to be screwed at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And you're going to buy the car and there's going to be more problems. You're going to have to pay for those problems. And then, you know, that, you know, it's sort of that cycle that never ends. And I mean, that's kind of why I wrote this book. You can go and you can spend the time and educate yourself here in a way that it's really hard to do when you're just Googling it. I write it from first person. I write it like I'm sitting there and talking to you about what you need to do in language you can understand, without jargon, without patronizing you, without assuming what knowledge you already have, and just give you a really solid foundation. It's not designed, to be the end-all, be-all of car books. It's designed to work with finding a great mechanic and working with that mechanic and, giving you resources for where you can do your research and things like that. But ultimately, it's supposed to help in those situations where you have $5,000 in your bank account and you need a car. You can sit down and read the first 2 chapters and really take it step by step. Here's how I research so I can figure out what the best car is for my needs and my budget. And here's how I find that car. Because, just going to your local Toyota dealership because you're looking for a Toyota isn't always the best way of finding the car you need. And here's how you look at it, and here's how you test drive it, and here's how you negotiate.
Right. It's more about empowering you to have the skill set to find the answers to your questions versus being an end-all be-all solution book.
And most of the answers will be here. Most of them. I mean, I worked really hard on it, and everybody who's read it has really appreciated what I've been able to bring to the table and how much information I've, jam-packed into a paperback book that you can just pop into your glove box. And, you can read it from start to finish, and that's how I suggest folks start. Read it from start to finish, and then reference back the sections when things come up in your car ownership journey. So if you are in a position where you're like, oh, my car needs this major repair, and the repair is worth more than how much the car is, how do I decide if I should get another car or should move on? You're going to read that section. And then when you make your decision at the end of that section, either you're going to go get your car fixed, or you're going to start at the beginning and learn how to buy a book, how to buy a car, and then how to insure it and how to find a mechanic for it. Or maybe you're at the repair shop and they tell you need to replace your coolant, and you can go to the coolant section and learn what does coolant do and where can you find information on how often it needs to be replaced and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. And I'm wondering too, you mentioned briefly earlier that you're doing a book tour that's going to be in Massachusetts in April. Yes,
so my book tour is going to be very different from probably any other book tour you'd ever come across. Mechanic Shop Femme book tour is going to go to 16 women, queer, and POC-owned mechanic shops across the country, including 2 in Massachusetts. One is Santora Automotives in North Oxford, which is just a little ways away from Boston, and that is a trans femme-owned mechanic shop, and it's an incredible community resource that I feel like folks should know. And that's where I'm kicking off the book tour. That's the day my book publishes. I'm very, very, very excited about that. And then I'm going to Martha's Vineyard to Andrea's Auto, which is also a queer woman-owned mechanic shop. And that's going to be on April 10th. And those are my 2 Massachusetts stops.
That's so exciting. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
How long have you been working on this book, too?
A while. A while. The Mechanic Shop Femme's Guide to Car Ownership is a traditionally published book by one of the big 5 publishers, one of the biggest publishers in the world, Hachette, through the Little Brown Spark imprint. So yeah, I'm not printing it myself, although, props to folks that write their books themselves and publish it themselves. I feel like that's a huge feat and one that I was not ready to take on at the time. But yeah, and the book is available everywhere books are sold, or you can go to mechanicshopfemme.com/book, and on that page you can get all the places where you can pre-order, and you can get your book tour tickets directly from there. Mechanic shops are small, which means that tickets are limited to each of the stops. So if you want to come, get your ticket. It's $5 because I want to to start a scholarship fund in honor of my mentor, Jill Trotta, and to help women and queer folks, sort of like bring this all a full circle. And I'm really proud of what I accomplished, I think, and I can't wait for it to be out in the world and for folks to see it.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. It sounds like it's going to be really helpful to a lot of people.
I think so. We'll see what everybody else thinks.
I had one more quick question too. We usually ask this to writers and artists, so I just wanted to ask you because you just mentioned. We tend to kind of try to point to our creative lineage or an interest lineage for people, where the seeds of your ideas came from. And I know you just mentioned your mentor. Was that someone that you had worked with when you were at Sears, or was that later on?
No, that was later on. Yeah, I think I told the story of how I started in the automotive industry at the beginning of our conversation. And I mean, I'm just a workaholic that will never be happy with where I'm at. And I always need to press on and do something else. But there was always a thought in my mind that one day my work is going to become a book. And a while back, I hired somebody to transcribe some of my classes, although I never used that for the book, because I was like, oh, maybe I will do something. And what really set the trigger off is that Sarah Prager, who is a queer historian, she interviewed me for a story about my wedding for Go magazine. And later she said to me, hey Kaya, I think you should write a book. Can I introduce you to my agent? Or she might have not said, I think you should write a book. She might have said, are you thinking about buying a book? I don't remember at this point. I want to introduce you to my agent. And that's such a powerful thing, because that never happens. That never happens. Writers don't introduce you to their agent, because, what you're looking for and what their agent is looking for is often not the same thing. But she took a leap, and I'm forever grateful that she did. And although it did not work out with the agent, I wrote my book proposal while I was under her, and then we parted ways. I posted on Twitter, and I said, I wrote this book proposal. I've parted ways with my agent. Here's what I do. Here's who I am. I'm looking for a new agent. So if anybody has any suggestions or introductions, let me know. And it just so happened that post did not get any traction, just so you know. But it just so happened that it was at the right moment, because my current agent, Maria Vincent, she was on Twitter looking at my page. She wasn't even following me yet.
Oh, wow.
And she saw the tweet, and she sent me a message, and she's like, I would like to see the book proposal. So I sent it to her, and then she signed me, and then she sold it to Little Brown Spark. So it's kind of fate, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love when things come together like that in a way that just feels like it's meant to be.
Yeah, sometimes you work very hard until that meant to be moment,
Yeah.
when everything just comes together like the way it should. I think people hear stories, especially stories like that, where, it just happened out of the blue, and they're like, I need this moment, this this gift from the universe to just show up. But what you don't see is 10 years I spent building to this point where somebody will see my page and, and be able to see my vision without even talking to me.
Right. There had to be that knowledge and expertise in the book proposal to start with for them to reach out about it.
Right. So, don't give up, even if you're not in a place where things are happening for you, where those full circle moments are, really coming to be. Don't give up hope, because it takes time, a lot of time, and many, many, many tears, and many frustrating moments, but hopefully it will work out. And once you are able to get the book, then you have to sell it, and that takes its own its own work.
Which brings us to the tour.
Yes.
Oh, well, that all sounds so exciting. Brian, did you have any last questions?
No, I mean, I just wish you congratulations, and I think it's really awesome that you put this together and it's getting the recognition, and I'm just glad you're putting this out there. I'm really happy that for all the people that are going to benefit from it, and we're happy to have talked to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, thank you so much for talking to us, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Boston Art Podcast is an independent DIY production by Brian Huntress and Theodora Earthworms. The information contained in this episode represents the views and opinions of the original creators or our guests, and does not represent any institution, organization, or business. Find us on Instagram at Boston Art Podcast, and tune in for a new episode every Friday. Thank you for listening.